downloading a good research report in health and social care. And from that report, what we're going to do using secondary research as a technique, we are going to be then looking at, drafting a research proposal. So for this particular learning outcome, if we start, we're looking at, just to recap for those of you who have joined right now, thanks for joining. We are looking at academic and research skills for health and social care / business. And this is a common unit. And what we are looking at is learning outcome 4 today, which basically focuses on be able to plan and draft a piece of research. That means here, what we are looking at is we are required to practically go about drafting a research plan. And also at the end of the research plan, what we are going to be able to do then is look at basically creating that or finalizing that research plan into a project, into a mini project, as I would put it this way. The reason I say that is because at level 3, we are not looking at doing any primary research, but now that we have learned about what is primary and secondary research, what we should be able to do is look at shortlisting a report, which I'm going to show you from 2 different websites. The report that you shortlist should be a report that you feel is an area of your interest. And when I say an area of your interest, what I mean by that is that you are looking at essentially picking out a topic that you feel is going to be something that you are passionate about in health and social care, or if it's going to be something that you are interested in knowing about or studying about or increasing your knowledge. So let me bring up these 2 websites as well on the screen. And the reason I say this is because I mentioned the point that we are looking at primarily, doing what is called secondary or desk-based research. And when we do desk-based research, what we want to be able to do is download a good report that we feel is something which, is going to be an area of interest. And that report with the area of interest would essentially allow us to, basically look at shortlisting a topic that we would want to study and research going further. So if I show you a bit of a full screen, the reason I want to do that is because there are a couple of things that I want to show, and we'll switch over them, between them. But for a moment, I want to show the full screen. So we've got the unit spec here, as you can see. And we are looking at covering learning outcome 4, which has 2 assessment criteria and 1 which is merit. This is a template that I'm going to share with you, which is primarily going to be helping us to draft a piece of research. Now, this is a template which is basically a template for populating. That means you will be filling this up, and this template would also become a part of your assignment. So this template will allow us to formulate what is called a research proposal. And when we detail it out at a later stage, by looking at following what I've given as a bit of a guidance, would essentially allow us to complete learning outcome 5 as well. Because learning outcome 4 is about be able to draft, be able to plan. We are going to plan how we go about doing research. And then we have to, using that planning, draft a research proposal and an overview of that report. In learning outcome 5, we have to finalize that report in terms of a research project. So essentially what we want to be able to do is, what we want to do in learning outcome 4 and 5, which we're going to study together, what we want to be able to do is basically, so what we want to be able to do is basically in the learning outcome 4, be able to shortlist a research project from the 2 websites that I'm going to show you, download that report, then summarize that report by extracting key points which are required to create a research plan. And I will show that to you in a second. And that research plan would essentially then allow us to, in learning outcome 5, create that plan and elaborate that into a research project. And that would cover this particular part that I've shown you on the, in the second part of the research proposal plan. and it would help us cover task 5.1. If you're looking at achieving merit, you'll need to take some oral feedback or feedback from me on the research project that you've drafted. And then we will also look at a bit of a viva in terms of a question answer session on that research project that you have drafted, and that will help you go towards distinction. So tasks 4, when I say task, I mean learning outcome 4 and 5 on the assignment brief. These are going to be labeled as tasks. So if I just, for the purpose of showing, the assignment brief as well here, just to draw attention and put all of them in perspective. So what I would do is basically just move this here. This is the research proposal. This is the unit spec. And then this is where I have the assignment brief. So in the assignment brief, what you will see is task 3 has assessment criteria of 4 and 5 put together. So basically task 3 is going to cover the whole of learning outcome 4 and whole of learning outcome 5. So in task 3, you have some of the basic activities, which is create your research plan, outline a process or the steps through which you are going to carry out this research, create a first draft of your research work, list down the resources that you're going to use. When I say resources, I mean websites, journals, articles that you'll refer. And that is where my point of downloading a good existing research report comes in, and I'll show you that. And then your final draft that has to be produced to a professional standard is basically this part covering 5.1. And then the extension activities, as you can see, would basically be hitting 4M1, 5M1, and 5D1. So here, this is an important discussion and a session today, because what we are looking at doing is covering learning outcome 4 and 5 together in today's session to a certain extent, simply because that is how it has been given out in the assignment brief for this particular unit. And that's why I want to show both of these documents side by side. Now, having said that, very briefly, I'll skip over to, the main document so that you're able to see a bit more clearly. There are 2 sites which are given, in the research proposal on the heading. One of them is Health Foundation, the site that you see here. And this site is shortcut to research projects. That means there are lots of projects, lots of areas of research which has been carried out, studies which have been carried out to research, topics within health and social care by Health Foundation are listed down alphabetically on this particular site. This is one site which I would show you and I would ask you to refer to, but for now, just the site. The second site is the NHS Scotland website. There are lots and lots of research projects which have been published from 2018 up until 2013. So we want to be looking at the latest reports or the latest study reports which have been published. And here, depending on the area or the topic of our choice, we are going to be looking at shortlisting a particular report, getting into it in terms of detail, and I'll show you what we'll do. And that report is then going to be used by us. If I put it this way, from here, say, for example, if I shortlist this report we'll use to basically fill up, and draft our research proposal. Once the research proposal has been done and we filled up the basic parts, which is to draft a plan, and we put some, details into the plan in terms of what are the key objectives, what are the reasons why we would carry out the research, what is the methodology, what are the sources from which we'll gather information. Then for learning outcome 5, we are going to be using the same report to basically fill details in to draft a piece of research to a professional standard. And details like detailing on the aims, introduction, aims, objective, rationale of the project, looking at basic bits like the literature review, research methodology, all these parts will actually come from the research report that you have downloaded either from this site or from the Health Foundation website. Is that bit clear? I want to know so that what I've explained is something that you have understood. Is that clear? Yeah, I want to understand from all of you, is that clear?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. The reason I say this is because when I, share this particular screen with you now, the idea is that we need to be looking at understanding how you're going to go about actually doing the research. So I've got 2 yeses from 2 people. Thank you. And what I would want to do is get a bit more yeses from some of the other participants who are on the session. So Akhtar, for example, yourself, if you can confirm, Ambrose and Cynthia, if you can also confirm that you understood. So just to recap very briefly in 10 seconds, what we're going to do. Learning outcome 4 and learning outcome 5 are going to be covered together. So if I put it this way, show you this again. And the reason I say learning outcome 4 and learning outcome 5 is going to be done together is because in the learning outcome 4, we are looking at preparing to plan for an area of research and then draft a research proposal. And that would cover these tasks. Learning outcome 5 then looks at that proposal and it basically expands that research proposal into a professional standard draft of a research project. So what we want to be able to do is the plan that we've created and the research proposal that we've populated in learning outcome 4, we'll use that and then elaborate that into a full mini research project. Now, in order to do this, what I've suggested is that we've got, a template proposal template, which is this. And the reason why this has been named task 3 is because this is how it is labeled on the assignment brief as task 3. And one of the other reasons, if I quickly switch over again and just show you just the assignment brief for now, the reason of doing this is because when we look at the assignment brief for this unit, which you're seeing on your screen now, you would essentially see that task 3 talks about carry out an academic research project. And if you see the assessment criteria, how they've been labeled, so all the learning outcome 4 and the one assessment criteria of learning outcome 5 have all been clubbed together to ask you to create a plan, research plan, then outline that plan, and then look at the sources from which you would gather the data. And then finally, you're required to produce a mini research report, which is on that topic you have chosen. And then the extension activities cover all the merit and distinction criteria. So some of them would require you to take feedback from me and make improvements in the project. Some of them will require you to do a Viva session with me, which is like a Q&A session. And last but not the least, in some cases, for the distinction criteria, you're going to be looking at why have you chosen a particular research methodology, which is a primary or secondary research methodology, and you would justify the approach taken to actually do the basically when I say do, I mean write the research report or the mini research report. Now, because this learning outcome talks about be able to, and the learning outcome 5 also talks about be able to produce a final piece of academic work, that is where we have to practically go in and actually do this particular task. That means it involves us physically getting down to writing a research report. Without writing that research report, you would not be able to complete, task 3 in your assignment brief. Now, what I will briefly do is go through, I have a presentation as well, but because it's a practical task, what I want to do is actually show and talk about how this task is going to be done. And then we'll go into the presentation part because it will make more sense for you to understand what I've already said. And that is what is actually depicted on the slides. So in this case, at level 3, we are not looking at, I would suggest that you are not looking at carrying out primary research. And if I look at the assignment brief, it says as a part of your course, you will need to research information using both primary and secondary methods and write up and or present your findings. For example, in your assignment in health and social care sector, you would need to research the structure of the sector and current legislation. So in this case, if I look at the structure and legislation of health and social care sector in the UK, you could look at, for example, because it's saying, for example, you are basically looking at, if I switch you over to the assignment brief so that we can see it together. So as you can see here in the assignment brief, it talks about, for example, you're not looking at taking up a research which is going to be like a PhD research or a master's research. Your research has to be commensurate to the level 3. So it is a small mini research project. So it says, for example, in your assignment on health and social care sector, you're required to research the structure of the sector and current legislation. Using this example or other examples of academic research you have carried out, write up what did you complete to do your academic research. Make sure you include. So here, rather than going out and using primary research methods like questionnaires, surveys, feedback, interviews, focus group discussions, we are going to shortlist a report which has been written and conducted to carry out studies or maybe discuss issues or gap areas, essentially research in the health and social care sector. And it is used both primary and secondary methods to be able to come out with its findings. So they have used questionnaires, surveys, reports, data from published websites or government websites and international agencies, and use them together with the primary data which has been collected. And then they have presented the findings of that research report. So here, what I have done is I have converted the task 3 into what is called a research proposal. And this research proposal that you see, if I switch you over now, that research proposal that you see, I have created various heads in that research proposal. So when I say various heads in that research proposal, what you're going to see is that obviously you'll write your name here. You'll write the topic of research that you're doing. What is your role in the organization when you carry out the research? And in this case, I'm a student. So I'll say, as a student researcher, you're going to state the objectives and aims of your research, which are briefly done. And then you explain the background of your research, which is primarily found in the abstract or introduction of the report that we download. I'll show you that. You're going to put out what are the specific areas of research, what are the key issues, what is the broader significance of why this research report was published and studies undertaken. Some part of it would be looking at literature review. That means review of the existing data which is available in the public domain, which sometimes researchers look into to find out, okay, hang on, before I start my project or before I start going into other investigative studies to carry out or find out reasons of doing this, let me see what is available in the present domain. Are there any such similar reports, any such similar projects which have been carried out by various people in different countries or in different locations? What have been the outcomes, and how they've gone about doing the research? What have been the shortcomings? What are the limitations? So you'll basically be looking at finding out first before taking the plunge and jumping in to see, is there anything which is already present in the domain, in the public domain, and which has already been published, and there's a study which has already been carried out. Now, a simple example that I would give you here is when we talk about literature review, what we mean by that is, if I look at now COVID-19 pandemic, just as an example. Now, there was no data available on the COVID pandemic because it's a new pandemic which the mankind has faced. But if we were to face a similar situation again, what we have is a lot of data now available that we can actually review how it spreads, where it spreads, what are the frequency of its spread, how does it affect people, what kind of age groups it affects. We have lots of data available. So for us to be able to look at doing any study or taking on any investigation, we would now be able to do so very openly and very quickly because there's existing data and trends and findings available from what research has already been carried out so far in the in this particular domain is concerned. So when we look at carrying out a new research, for example, if it's a new variant which has come out and we want to find out how the protein or the DNA of the protein actually mutates. So what we will do is basically go into existing studies, look at what was the original virus, as we call it, the SARS-19 virus. What was the original properties of the virus, how it mutated, what are the factors which basically help it in replication or duplication. And that understanding, when we apply to our existing research, to see that, okay, we don't need to start from zero or step one. We're already at step 4. So we have all this information that we have gathered by carrying out what is called a literature review. And this literature review is a piece that you normally write, which is an academic piece that you normally compile. And that would show your knowledge and understanding of the topic that you're undergoing, you're going to take research for. And this review is normally a critical evaluation of why do you think the current research or the current, let's say, the approach that has been taken by researchers is not fit for purpose, and how things have changed, and why does it mandate a new research or a new approach that you need to come out with. And that is what is highlighted in literature review. So here, literature review, generally when we do a research project at bachelor's level or undergraduate degree level, master's degree level, they tend to be about 2,500 to 3,000 words. But here, because at level 3, we are going to be looking at the list of sources that we are going to be using to compile and create this evidence of research plan, is what we'll cover in the literature review. Is that okay? Okay, now the other bit that I would want to mention is that this research proposal then goes into methodology. Methodology is going to be, we are looking at a combination of primary and secondary methods to be able to draw data. The sources of information are basically going to be references that we normally put at the end of our research report, and they would be the list of sources that we've looked at for actually gathering data, for our mini research report. And then towards the end, we're going to summarize what are the expected results or conclusions that we are looking at drawing, and they would be listed down in a paragraph here. Now, there are some ethical considerations for research. Sometimes we anonymize data of participants so that details are not openly shared. Sometimes we also give considerations to people who want to opt out of research. They don't want their data to be published, or there are sometimes difficulties which could be in the form of limitations, primarily when we are looking at collecting data or carrying out some work or an activity, but it is more cost. It requires a lot of cost and it is not cost effective. So sometimes some of these activities are dropped from the areas of research. So you will have maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 ethical considerations. I've listed down a few just to give you an idea what these ethical considerations tend to be. Now, at any given stage for learning outcome 4, we are going to populate this part only, which is, if I break this into another page, and this will be learning outcome 5, which is draft, which is final draft produced to a professional standard. And we are looking at about 300 to 500 words. So this bit until page, if I insert a page number myself, I have forgotten. So if I insert a page, so up until page 4 is going to cover what is called your learning outcome 4. Learning outcome 4, which basically focuses on, if I say learning outcome 4, be able to plan, and then it says the second part, and draft a piece of research. So this bit that we look at is primarily going to be, pages 1 to 4, So if I put say pages 1 to 4 is basically covering learning outcome 4. And then when we detail out the project, primarily in terms of producing it with these kind of headlines, then is where we will be, saying that this bit is going to be looking at, if I delete that, for example, and this bit, when we put the research report in this particular format, then it will be, considered a final draft of that particular report. So this is what will be required to be used as a template when we are looking at doing or covering the learning outcome 4 and learning outcome 5. Now, I will drop this template across onto, obviously this is available on Moodle, but what I'm also going to do is obviously drop a copy of this template across on, on the WhatsApp group right now. You can obviously access this template 100% from, the Moodle when you log. But what I would do is have this template available to you now, and drop this template to you now. And that should mean that you should be able to, start reading into this straight away, after the session. So what I would now do after I have dropped this to you on the WhatsApp, you would need to then look at, let's discuss some part of this with the presentation slides. So just give me 1 second to switch you over. Okay. I hope this bit is quite clear so far in terms of what we are expected to do and how we are going to go about doing the same. So here we go. That should now be available to you on the group in a second. And in the meanwhile, what I'll do is I'll switch over to the presentation. Okay. So this is what we are looking at now in terms of coverage. Just briefly today, learning outcome 4 and learning outcome 5. And this would be looking at covering, be able to draft a piece of research and a plan, and then produce it to an academic or a professional standard. Okay. Now, as I mentioned to you, so here the idea is to make a plan, and the plan is the research template which I've shared with you right now on the group. Now, this plan essentially focuses on looking at a relevant topic that you want to shortlist for the purposes of doing research. So what could be relevant topics that you could choose? There are a few that I've listed here, like impact of COVID-19 on businesses. How do you opt out of organ donation? A rapid review which has been carried out in the NHS, that why a lot of people are now opting out of any organ donation within the NHS. You could also look at maybe a topic like understanding nurse retention and its impact on patient safety, why nursing numbers, when they decline, the safety records at hospitals, tends to, go up. That means fatalities start to go up. And this is because, there is shortage of nurses. So this particular topic could be looked at. You could also look at something like NHS 111 service for children and young people. So there is a 999 helpline in the UK. If you have any issues or problems, for example, either police or ambulance, in those cases, you are able to reach out to the emergency services by dialing 999. But there's an additional service which was proposed and has been launched, and that service is calling 111, which is predominantly looking after, people with let's say, when I say people, I mean children and young people with difficulties, and they can reach out to emergency services using a call out number called 111. Now, there are lots of other topics that you can also look at using these two websites. And these two websites essentially are sites in which I mentioned to you that there are lots and lots of different types of research reports available. And you could shortlist something which is of your area of interest. And what I would do is briefly show you some of these reports. The reason is that shortlisting a good report is very important to be able to achieve the task 3, because if you download and shortlist a report which is going to go into hundreds of pages, then you'll be looking at spending a lot of time going through that research report to write maybe 500 words to complete a task or a part of your assignment. So it is going to be quite important to shortlist a report which is balanced. It has all the topics that we want to refer to, things like introduction, aims and objective, literature review, research methodology, data analysis and finding, and then towards the end, conclusion, and a good source of references, and something as a report which is taken into account researching about a particular topic, both using primary, oblique, secondary methods. Now, so if I look at going alphabetically across these reports, so you need to pick up an area of your interest. For example, my area of interest is integrated care. So when I click on integrated care, I go into further detail, and it has a report which is basically saying the research project was aimed to embed evidence and learning from previous research within practices at Bromley by Bow in East London and with other organizations throughout the UK. So when I click on this bit, it will give me some brief summary of why the research was carried out. It was carried out by whom, what is the intended area of the research, and who is the person responsible who would be able to answer some of these questions related to the research report which has been published. So it gives you a bit of an abstract here, which is quite useful, because when you look at shortlisting an area of research or a topic of research, your abstract will give you a good brief overview of what that research was, what has been published in the report, and what are the things which the report or the researchers, when they undertook this project, were able to accomplish. Now, what I want to be able to do apart from this is basically download, the research project. So I'm in research project, I'm in integrated care, and then there are social determinants of health, and then evidence into practice. And this is something that I want to be able to look at. So what I would do is, when I go into further details, as you can see, there are lots and lots of different reports which are, feeding into this report. And I think at any given stage, if I look at a particular report, what I want to be able to do is get hold of data like it has been presented here, research data, shortlisted, some discussions which have happened, which is to show summary. But these reports, essentially, as you can see, are just extracts of what actually have been published in the report. So for me, this is not going to cut it, because it is not showing me a detailed report which I need to look at from a point of view of doing my own research. So if I go back to research reports which are listed in the chronological order, so close that, and go back here. So what I want to be able to do is look at, say, for example, a different research report wherein there are bits and pieces given which I should be able to download pretty much straight away, and look at the details of a PDF document. And if I can't find, so there's a bit of fact finding that you have to do here in terms of choosing your topic. And the other bit that I would do is look at the other way of finding out would be go to the NHS Scotland website for a link which I've given, and then look at, it says full report. And I clicked on this, and what you will generally see is that there's a full report actually available, which details out why drug-related deaths among women are increasing in Scotland. and there's a full report which is generally available. So if I click on this, it should allow me to go in and check for that particular report. So what I want to do here is essentially look at downloading that particular report. And as you can see here, it lists out everything that we want to see. So there's an executive summary, which will basically give me details about the introduction of the research. Then there are bits and pieces that I would generally see in terms of when I go into the second section, background of research, why the research was carried out, as you can see here. Now, after the background, what I want to see is what are the various types of literature review they've done. So if I look at Appendix 1, it shows me what has been considered before this report has been written. And this will allow me to shortlist, say, for example, a good detailed PDF document, which I can then use primarily to write my own research proposal and populate that. And later on, basically after populating it, later on detailing it out in the 5 main chapters as introduction, literature review, research methodology, data collection, analysis and finding, and conclusion. And that would be good for me to be able to complete this particular part of the assignment. So if I look at a lot of different reports which are given here, say on autism, there's public attitudes towards drug dependence, and other bits and pieces of reports which are basically coming up. What I would do is basically look at clicking on one, going back into detail, and then seeing whether the report has all the headings that I need. So I need to look at summary, introduction, research methodology, as you can see, description to the participant, which is basically questionnaire, and then knowledge and information, which is data collection and findings, and then discussion on the findings, and then the questionnaire is also given. So excuse me. So in this particular report, this is a very good report because this provides us pretty much everything that you would want to see in a particular report to write your research proposal. And this is a good report for you to be able to then download. As you can see, all the details are given. We will have to do a lot of reading and then write some part of this in a summarized format in your own words. And that would essentially be looking at the reason why I have provided these 2 sites in particular, which will help you shortlist a research report for the purposes of doing your assignment and also accomplishing this learning outcome 4 and learning outcome 5. So if I just switch you back now to the presentation. Now, after you've downloaded a report, so I will show you what I've done. After I've downloaded the report, what I've done, gone ahead and done is primarily looked at filling the research proposal. So from the report, what I have done is I've extracted what are the aims and objectives of research, what are the how was the literature review carried out, what are the areas through which the researchers actually looking at collecting the evidence for carrying out this research. And then in the later parts, I've also looked at graphs, charts, tables, which have been used to present the information which has been gathered by collecting data, for this particular research project. And I will look at how the data has been captured, whether it's been done through surveys, interviews, existing reports, or existing published data. And that will give me a very good idea whether I've considered primary or secondary sources for the purposes of carrying out this particular research. And then what I would do is at some stage, once I have created that piece of, when I've started to populate the research proposal, what I will then do at some stage would be to primarily look at going into and then, reading some bits of the sections of the report, which is covering introduction, literature review. I'm going to be looking at how the research methodology is, or what are the areas through which they've gone about carrying the research, how the data was collected and analyzed, and then finally look at putting that into a bit of summary and conclusion with the references towards the end of the report being looked at for the purposes of, sources that are going to be useful for me to primarily look at writing the research project. And this is how you would go about, completing the research proposal part of it. Is that clear? Is that understood? So what I want to do is understand if you've understood how you will be looking at starting learning outcome 4 by looking at the task 3 research proposal template, then go on to the 2 websites, the NHS Scotland website, which is on the NHS website as archives for research projects, or the Healthcare Foundation, choose a topic of your liking, and that is what you are going to see then when you click on it, whether there's a report available or not. And does the report, if the report is provided, does it have the sections that I want to look at for, extracting information and data from it? Things like, let's put it this way, how the research was carried out, aims and objectives of the research project. Is there a research methodology to it? What are the areas through which they've collected data, sources of information for literature review? And then finally, does the report have any graphs or charts or tables that I can use later when I finalize my research plan into a final produced professional standard report? Will I be able to take some screen grabs of the charts, tables, and graphs which have been used in the report to present its findings in a summarized, concise fashion? Will I be able to get access to that? And if the report has these as charts, diagrams, or findings given as charts and diagrams or pictures, then it makes it much more meaningful for you to be able to look at that report and that kind of a project, which will allow you to comprehensively and convincingly do both tasks 3 and then, which is basically learning outcome 4 and also learning outcome 5. Is that okay? So any questions on today's discussion? That is where, obviously we'll stop our discussion today so that you are able to understand what is to be done. And I've shared the task proposal with you on WhatsApp. It is also available on Moodle, and that should allow you to start planning to start doing this particular task by shortlisting a report and then populating the research proposal. The proposal that I've provided also has some filled data on it. You can delete that data, which is filled up as a dummy data, and that should then be used to fill the data that you download from the report that you've shortlisted from any 2 of these websites. So thank you so much for attending. Yes, and one of the other learning outcomes, yes. So here, that however, some of the are not listed. Yeah, so basically the references have been used primarily from different, sessions. For example, if I show you the research task, proposal, which I've shared. So, every time I do this session, sometimes, I will change some of the topics here, because of showing how to go about doing it. And in those cases, these, references, I have not changed. I've left them as it is because they would have been for different topics that I've discussed or different reports that I've looked at. And that is where these are just as a sample given to you to say this is how you need to mention maybe a couple of books, articles, or journals which have been looked at from the research report to be able to put as sources of information that you'll be gleaning data from, and they are not in any particular order. So this is a pre-populated template, but when I start doing it, what I would do is basically delete some of this bit like that, and then start to fill it up of what you are expecting to do at your end. So this is how it will become. And what I will do is, if I delete some of these, what you are going to do is primarily look at only the guidelines that I've given as pointers to read, and this is how the task empty proposal is supposed to be. as you can see here. So that is an example of a filled proposal, just to give you as a template. But this is how generally you would see that the proposal template would be in terms of doing the task 3 later for the assignment. So I hope it answers your question. Anybody else, any other questions? Okay. Great. So what I will do is I'll stop the session here and we'll meet next week. And next week when we meet up, we'll be looking at, covering some part of learning outcome 6. Reason learning outcome 5 is predominantly drafting your final report. So learning outcome 6 is what we will concentrate on next week, Monday. And then Tuesday, we'll be doing the assignment discussion for this particular unit. So until then, thank you so much for attending. And if you have any questions or if you have any queries or doubts at any given point in time, feel free to email that over to me, at Raman. I will text that email address on the chat at raman@ukversity.co.uk. But up until then, thank you so much for joining in today, and I will speak to you next week. Take care. Bye for now.